Today we are going to tell you about a mysterious case. A case that remained unsolved for the last 50 years. But what was it about this story that made it take half a century to solve? And what was the clue, the single piece of evidence, that finally cracked it after 50 years? We're going to reveal all of this in today's video. So make sure you watch till the very end. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It was a quiet, cold night in a small, forgotten town. The streets were empty, shadows stretching from the dim streetlights, and the wind whispered through the cracks of abandoned buildings. At the edge of town, hidden behind overgrown weeds and rusted fences, stood an old, neglected house. Inside, a dusty wooden box rested in a corner, untouched for decades. No one had thought much of it until one day investigators finally arrived, called by a tip that seemed almost too late. At first glance, it appeared to be nothing more than an abandoned relic. But as they carefully inspected the box, the first signs of a long-forgotten story began to surface. Inside the box, a faded photograph, a yellowed letter, and a small trinket, each a silent witness to a child's life that had been lost, ignored, and forgotten for 50 long years. The investigators exchanged glances. This was not going to be a simple case. Every detail, every overlooked clue, every faint mark hinted at something bigger, something far more mysterious than anyone had imagined. And then they noticed it, something so small, yet so important, that it would eventually unlock the truth that had eluded everyone for half a century. The case that had baffled generations was just beginning to reveal its secrets. And this was only the beginning. The next morning, the town woke up to a flurry of whispers. The news of the discovery had spread like wildfire. Reporters crowded the area, curious neighbors peered through cracked windows, but the investigators focused only on the box and its contents. Detective Harris, a seasoned investigator with over 20 years of experience, knelt beside the box. He carefully removed the faded photograph, revealing a small child with a timid smile and eyes that seemed too wise for his age. "Who was this boy?" he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. The letter, brittle and yellowed, contained scribbled words in a hurried hand, almost illegible after 50 years. Still, certain phrases stood out. "They don't understand. Keep it safe. One day someone will know the truth." Harris felt a chill. Whoever wrote this had intended for the story to survive, even if only in fragments. The box also contained a small trinket, a tiny toy soldier tarnished with age. It was a personal item, something that suggested care and affection, yet loneliness. Each object whispered its own secrets, hinting at a life filled with unseen struggles. The detectives began their interviews with elderly residents who had lived in the town for decades. Some remembered the child vaguely, others didn't want to talk. One old neighbor finally spoke. "I remember, there was a boy. Quiet, different from the others. He often wandered alone, never spoke much about home. I always felt something wasn't right. But no one could provide details. The trail had gone cold decades ago, and the memories were hazy, fragmented." Harris and his team examined the old records. Police reports, missing person files, neighborhood complaints. Every lead seemed to lead nowhere. A blank wall of dead ends. Yet something gnawed at them. A single overlooked clue from 50 years ago had been hiding in plain sight. A small mark in the corner of the photograph, almost invisible to the naked eye. It was a symbol, something odd, out of place, deliberately left. "That's it," Harris whispered to his partner. "That's what they missed all these years. That mark, it's the key." As the day turned to night, the investigators worked tirelessly. They cross-referenced old addresses, school records, and even birth certificates. Every name, every date, every location was a potential lead, but nothing seemed to fit. The mystery deepened, the suspense thickened, and the child's story remained locked behind decades of silence. And yet, Harris couldn't shake the feeling that someone, somewhere, knew more than they were saying. Someone had watched this story unfold silently, and now, after 50 years, the truth was beginning to stir. The box had been opened, the first clues uncovered, and a chain reaction had begun. A reaction that would finally bring the past screaming back to life. As the investigation progressed, Detective Harris realized that the past had layers far more tangled than anyone had imagined. Every piece of evidence seemed to point in multiple directions, and every witness recollection contradicted another. The first hidden clue came from an unexpected source: a diary discovered wedged beneath the floorboards of the old house. Its pages were brittle and yellowed, filled with a child's messy handwriting and cryptic drawings. Some drawings were innocent: trees, animals, small houses, but others were disturbing. Dark figures lurking behind windows, doors left slightly ajar, and shadows that seemed to follow the child wherever he went. Harris knew immediately, these weren't just childish scribbles. They were messages carefully coded, desperate to be understood. Next came an old map, folded and torn, hidden behind the fireplace. It contained notations that didn't match any street in the town, locations marked with symbols identical to the mark on the photograph. "This can't be a coincidence," Harris muttered. "Someone left these for us to find 50 years later." But as they tried to piece together the puzzle, false leads began to emerge. A former neighbor insisted he had seen the child with a man who didn't live in the town, a stranger whose description kept changing. Another claimed the child had a secret friend who watched over him, but no one could confirm who it was. Each clue seemed to open doors, only to slam them shut moments later. It was a maze of deception, misdirection, and half-truths. The investigators began to suspect that someone in the town had been intentionally hiding the truth, covering tracks, and protecting a secret that even the oldest residents wouldn't dare reveal. Late one night, while sifting through old photographs, Harris noticed something chilling. A faint outline of a figure in a doorway, barely visible in the corner of one picture taken 50 years ago. Could this figure be the key to understanding what really happened? Or was it just another red herring meant to mislead anyone who looked too closely? The team started cross-referencing all the symbols, drawings, and mysterious notations. Slowly, patterns began to emerge, but each new connection only deepened the mystery. Who was leaving these clues? Why now? And most importantly, why did it take 50 years for anyone to even begin to notice them? Every step forward seemed to awaken the shadows of the past. Each new piece of evidence hinted at dangers long forgotten, secrets deliberately buried, and a child's life that had been shaped by forces no one could fully understand. The story of the box, the photograph, the letter, and now the diary and map, was no longer just about a child. It was about a mystery that had survived half a century, waiting for the right eyes, the right mind, and the right moment to finally be revealed. Weeks of painstaking investigation had led the team to countless dead ends, but Detective Harris refused to give up. Every small clue, every faded document, every cryptic symbol was a piece of a puzzle that had waited 50 years to be solved. Late one evening, as he pored over the diary again, Harris noticed something he had missed before: a series of numbers scribbled in the margin, barely visible. At first glance, they seemed random: 14, 27, 63, 88. But when cross-referenced with old town maps, school records, and archival police reports, a chilling pattern emerged. The numbers pointed to locations, places the child had visited, times he had been seen, and most importantly, a hidden room in the abandoned house where the box had been found. Harris realized this was not accidental. Someone had left a trail, carefully hidden, but deliberately meant to be discovered. The next day, the team returned to the house with renewed determination. Using the map, the diary, and the numerical clues, they found a loose floorboard in the attic, which led to a small hidden compartment. Inside, they discovered a collection of letters, more photographs, and an old locket. The letters were addressed to no one, but the handwriting was unmistakably that of the child's parent. Each letter contained confessions, regrets, and pleas to keep it safe. One letter, in particular, revealed the shocking truth. The child had been trying to warn someone about a dangerous person in the town, someone who had been watching, manipulating, and controlling events behind the scenes. The team was stunned. 50 years had passed, but the truth had been hidden in plain sight, carefully encoded by a desperate child. The locket contained a small photograph of a shadowy figure, the first real visual lead they had ever obtained. Harris felt his pulse quicken. "This is it," he whispered. "This is the breakthrough we've been waiting for, the key to finally solving the mystery." But with this discovery came new questions. Who was the shadowy figure? Was this person still alive? And most importantly, why had they gone to such lengths to bury the truth for 50 years? The investigators now knew they were standing on the edge of something monumental. The breakthrough had opened a door that no one had dared approach for decades. Every piece of evidence pointed toward one inevitable conclusion. The mystery was unraveling, but the most shocking revelations were still to come. As night fell over the town, the hidden room seemed almost alive, holding its breath, waiting for the final pieces of the puzzle to fall into place. The case that had haunted generations was finally moving toward resolution, but the path ahead was still shrouded in darkness, danger, and deception. The following days were tense. Detective Harris and his team now had tangible leads, but the deeper they dug, the darker the story became. Every letter, every photograph, every cryptic symbol pointed to a truth that had been deliberately hidden. Someone powerful, someone who had manipulated events for decades. The shadowy figure in the locket became their primary focus. Cross-referencing old town records, school rosters, and historical police files, they began to uncover the first hints of a person who had been influencing events from behind the scenes. This person had connections no one expected. Friends in high places, long-standing grudges, and secrets buried in family histories. One witness, an elderly man who had been a neighbor of the child's family, recalled an incident from decades ago. "I remember seeing someone at their window, always watching. He never spoke, but you could feel his presence. Something wasn't right." The team pieced together the witness accounts. Slowly, a chilling picture emerged. The child had been under constant surveillance, manipulated, and possibly even threatened. The emotional weight of the discovery was immense. For 50 years, a family had lived with the consequences of a secret that no one had dared to expose. But the clues were not straightforward. False trails, misdirection, and carefully crafted alibis made it almost impossible to pinpoint the culprit. It was as if the person responsible had anticipated every move, leaving just enough evidence to intrigue investigators, but not enough to reveal the full truth, until now. A breakthrough came when Harris noticed a recurring symbol in nearly all of the letters, photographs, and documents. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but consistent, a signature of the person who had orchestrated events. The detective realized that this was no ordinary case. This was a story of obsession, control, and decades of deception. The emotional toll on the team was palpable. Each new piece of evidence was not just a clue, it was a reminder of the suffering endured by the child and their family, and the audacity of someone who had kept such a secret for 50 years. As night fell once again over the town, Harris stood in the old house, staring at the locket and letters, his mind racing. He knew they were on the verge of exposing someone who had believed their secret would remain buried forever. But with this revelation came danger. The closer they got to the truth, the more uncertain their path became. Who would stop at nothing to keep the secret hidden? And how far would they go to prevent the past from being revealed? One thing was certain, the next steps would be decisive. The mystery that had haunted generations was finally within reach, but its final resolution would come at a price. Days turned into nights as Detective Harris and his team traced every last clue. The symbols, letters, and photographs had finally led them to a single individual, a person whose secrets had been hidden for half a century. The culprit had been someone no one expected. Someone who had blended into the town's quiet life, unnoticed, unassuming, but whose influence had shaped decades of events. The team pieced together the timeline. The child had discovered something dangerous, something the culprit wanted buried. And that's when the manipulation began. Subtle threats, orchestrated lies, and control that spanned years. The breakthrough came when Harris uncovered an old journal hidden behind the attic wall. The journal detailed the culprit's meticulous planning, the cover-ups, and even references to the symbols left in photographs and letters. Every page revealed the motive, a combination of fear, obsession, and the desperate desire to keep a powerful secret hidden. Harris felt the weight of it all. 50 years of suffering, silence, and unanswered questions were finally converging. The shadowy figure from the locket, the person who had haunted the child's life, was now fully identified. The identity shocked the investigators. But the story wasn't just about exposure. It was about the child's courage, the family's pain, and the power of truth surviving decades. Every piece of evidence painted a picture of struggle, resilience, and a secret that had haunted an entire town. Finally, the team arranged a confrontation. The culprit, now cornered by decades of evidence, had no choice but to face the truth. Confessions were made. Lies unraveled. The town's long-forgotten secrets spilled into the light for the first time in 50 years. For the first time, the child's story could be told fully. The mystery that had tormented generations was resolved, not by chance, but by perseverance, careful investigation, and a single clue that had waited patiently for discovery. The emotional impact was overwhelming. Families wept, neighbors reflected, and Detective Harris knew that while justice could never restore lost time, it had finally brought closure to a story that refused to die. As the sun rose over the small town, the dusty attic, the forgotten letters, the photographs, and the mysterious box all stood as silent witnesses, reminders that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, always finds a way to come to light. The case was closed. The mystery solved. 50 years of secrets finally uncovered, and a story that would be remembered forever.